Hi and welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a clickable button in the Blender game engine. So right now if my cube character comes over and touches one of these red hazard spikes, it basically dies. What I want it to do is I want it to do a couple of things. I want it to go to another scene. It'll be a lose or game over scene. And on that scene I want there to be text and a clickable button so the player can restart. Okay, so first things first, I need to make that scene to be able to go there. So I'm going to come up here to the upper kind of middle area here, and that's your scene browser. And on the left hand side you'll see that you can see all the scenes that you have, and I've got 2 levels and a win scene. I'm going to click on plus and I'm going to choose brand new scene, so new. So now I've got just a grid with nothing on it. I'm going to press Shift C, and that gets my 3D cursor at the center of my world. I'm going to now press Shift A, and I'm going to add in a camera because I need to be able to see. So there's the camera. Now the cameras in Blender always come in at a 3/4 angle, just like that. So there is a keyboard shortcut to fix that, but I want to also encourage you to press N, and this is what you can kind of see what's going on here. So you can see the location, rotation, and scale of the camera. Scale doesn't really matter. So you could manually reset the rotation. You could do 0, 0, and 0, and you could do it that way. The faster way of doing that is with the keyboard shortcut, and that is when you select any object, if you press Option R, it resets the rotation of that object. Whether it's a camera or a mesh, you get the idea. Okay, so generally for things like heads-up displays and win and lose screens, generally it's just faster and easier to set your camera looking straight down at the grid. The player won't know they're looking down, they'll think they're looking straight forward. Okay, so with that there, again I'm going to press Shift C to get my 3D cursor at the middle of the grid. I'm going to now go ahead and add in some text. So I'm going to do Shift A and I'm going to add in some text. Text comes in, and the text is a pretty different object. It's not a mesh object, it's a text object. When you press tab, you only have object in edit mode. So when I go into edit mode, I get this little bar, this little cursor, and I can go ahead and press delete or backspace, and I can go ahead and put in game over. Okay, so there we go. And now I'll tab and get out of edit mode. Okay, so a couple of things here. Since a text object is not a mesh object, it follows some different rules than regular mesh objects. So what I want to do now is I want to get it into my camera view. So what I need to do is I need to press basically numpad 0. And when I press numpad 0, I can now look through the game. Okay, so it's too big, so I'll just press S and scale, and I'll bring it in right about here. G to grab, and I'll place it right about there. Okay, so normally you would come over here and you would choose material, add a new material, and we'll call it game over, text, and I'll go ahead and I'll give it kind of a light blue color. Why not? Now you can add on, you can turn on shadeless or not, so you can see that it turns blue. Another thing is that you have to remember is because we made a new scene, Blender's settings kind of got reset. So I have to come up here to Blender, to the render engine, and change it from Blender Render to Blender Game. These are two things that I tend to forget once in a while, so it's good to remember. The last thing you have to do is to be able to see all the right lighting and shadows and things like that, is you have to come here to the render panel, which is the camera, come down here, and right here where it says shading, turn on GLSL. That basically turns on all the really cool stuff. Okay, so now if I press P and play, you'll see that my font changes a little bit and it's pure white. So what gives? Well, it's because it's still a text object. To be able to see this color here, I typically have to convert it into a mesh object. But I'm going to show you a little trick around that. So what I want to do is I want to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to go ahead and press return, and I'm going to give the player some instructions. Okay, so I want them to press R to restart. Now I don't like how this is left aligned, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with the text object still selected, I'm going to come over here to the right. I'm going to click on the big letter F, which is the font panel. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to come down here to the paragraph section. And on the paragraph section you'll see that it's left aligned, but if I center align it, then we get that, and that just looks a little bit better. Okay, so this is, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this down a little bit because I want to be able to eventually put a button in here that they can click on. Okay, so I've just noticed that my camera has perspective on it. So generally what you want to do is on a scene like this where there's text or it's a HUD or something like that, you want to select your camera, then come over here on the camera panel, and right here where it says lens, change it to an orthographic lens. And what that will do is now, no matter how far away this object is away from the camera, everything will look nice and straight and flat and all good. Okay, so I want to give the player two ways to restart. They can click a button, or they can go ahead and they can press R. All right, actually let me fix the, sorry, I'm a little scattered. Let me fix the color. So when I press play, we get white and you can see it shifts over. How do we fix that? Well, if I come back to the font panel and I scroll down here, actually sorry, it's on the object panel with the orange cube, and I'll scroll down here and you'll see right here it says object color. So if I change that and I change that to the blue, now when I press play you'll see that it changes the color. The problem though is that it shifts over like that. So why is it doing that? Well, that means that we need to convert this to a mesh object, and then it will behave normally. The only problem with converting a text object to a mesh object is when you do so, your text will sort of freeze, and you won't be able to type and change it. So you have to really make sure that you have no spelling errors and you're pretty happy with the writing. Okay, so I have no spelling errors, I'm ready. So I'm going to press Option C. And when I press, or sorry, Alt C on a Windows, Option C on a Mac. So then I'm going to choose the second one here. I want a mesh from text. Okay, and it's from other things as well, but this is what you want, mesh from text. So when I do that, you won't see anything that happens, but now when I press P and play, it now stays in place and I get the color that I wanted. Okay, good. Now I'm going to set up some of my code. So I want to set up a keyboard sensor that is the letter R, and the actuator is going to let me do a scene actuator. Wire those up. And I don't want to restart, I want to set the scene and I want to go back to level 1. Okay, so that's all good. Alright, now to finish up this tutorial, I want to make a clickable button. So I'm going to do Shift A, I'm going to add in a mesh cube. I'll go ahead and enter edit mode, scale it down, go ahead and grab it, there we go. I'm going to quickly press Z and get into wireframe mode. I'm going to then box select by pressing B and box select. I'm going to select these bottom vertices. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just resize this so it's basically all nice and underneath my text. Okay, get out of object mode, press Z, go back into texture mode. Okay, so now I need to see what's going on. So you'll see that my cube is way above my text, so I'm going to go ahead and move it down below the text. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the button here, the rectangle cube, a new material. So it's selected, come over to the material panel, new, and maybe I'll go ahead and make it kind of a yellow. There we go. Now we don't have any lights in our scene, so that's why we're not really seeing anything. So I'm just going to do Shift A, add a lamp, and I'm just going to make it a point lamp. Bring it up on the Z a little bit. And there we go. Okay. Maybe I'll change it to something a little darker. Okay, and it's getting a lot of shine off of the lamp. So I'm going to come down here in the material panel. Underneath diffuse, there's specular, and if I go ahead and drag that down, you'll see that it'll either be no shine or a little bit of shine, and I'll have maybe just a tiny little bit on. Okay, so it's not the prettiest, but it'll work for now. Go ahead and save. All right, so now I want to set up. The keyboard is already set up, so that's great. So they can press it, but I also want them to be able to click here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the cube, and I'm going to come here to the sensor, and I'm going to make a mouse sensor, and I'm going to leave it at left button because I want them to be able to left click. And then it's going to go to a edit scene editor or scene actuator. Wire those up, and then I'll have it set scene and set it to level 1. Okay, but there's a problem with this. If I press play, now wherever they left click, it'll then go ahead and do it. So you also can't see the mouse, so that's kind of a problem. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, so now to make the mouse visible, I'm going to go back to my level 1 scene, and I'm going to select my cube character. Okay, and this is where my character, when he hits the red spike, he basically he dies, but he also needs to be able to go to the lose screen. So the cube ends, but I'm also going to add in a scene actuator, and I'm going to have them happen at the same time. So 2 actions off of one sensor, and it's going to set the scene, and the scene is going to be lose. So I haven't renamed my scene yet to lose, so I'll go back here to that, and I'll rename it lose. There we go. Go back to level 1, and you can see that it actually renamed itself, so that's great. Okay, so again, 2 things are happening. I am hitting the hazard spike, and then the cube player goes away, and then I go to the lose screen. At the same time, what I want is I want to be able to see my mouse pointer when I get to the lose screen. So I'm going to add in a 3rd actuator, and this time it's a mouse actuator. Wire it up. And you can see in the mouse actuator, the mode is set to visibility, and visible is enabled. If it's disabled, it's dark. Okay, so let's see if that works. Okay, so there's my mouse. I'm on the right scene, and there we go. So it worked. And if I left click outside of the button, off the button, it still works. So I need to fix that. So I'm going to come to my lose scene, and right now it basically says that if I left click, I will be able to do that. I want to add in a 2nd mouse sensor, and this time instead of left button, I want it to be mouse over, so the mouse has to physically be over the button. And I'm going to hook up this 2nd sensor to this AND controller. So what it's saying now is that this actuator can't execute until both of these conditions are correct or true. So now I'll press play. Oops. Okay, so there's my mouse. If I left click off, nothing. If I left click on, there we go, and we got it. The only problem now, and this is the last thing, is that when I go back to the level 1, I see the mouse cursor. So what I need to do is I need to create a mouse actuator and wire that up. And I'm going to set it to invisible. So I'm going to disable that. Okay, so now everything should work fine. No mouse. Good. Got the mouse. Left click. Mouse is gone. And there we go. And it can repeat. So to finish up, what would I do anything to change? Well, I'm kind of giving the player two ways to restart. They can press R or they can left click, but I'm not being very clear here. So I think if I were to change this, I would probably either get rid of the button because it's kind of confusing. They don't know they can click it, and I'll just have it be a keyboard restart, or I would just say game over, and then I would give them the button down here and have it say retry so they know they can click on it, make it look a little bit more like a button, make it look a little bit more like a 3D button maybe, and do something like that. So always think about how clear you are as a game developer. So I hope this helped, and good luck.